I spent 25 years building an award-winning restaurant empire, so my son could have every opportunity I never did. 1 month before his lavish wedding, he called to tell me I wasn't welcome in any of the wedding photos because I would embarrass him in front of his wealthy in-laws. What the Cavendish family discovered at their precious country club the day after the wedding silenced their entitled attitudes forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I always dreamed of the day I'd watch my son marry the love of his life. As a single mother who built a successful restaurant business from nothing, I had imagined all the ways I would help create his perfect wedding day. The exquisite menu I'd design with authentic flavors from my Chinese heritage blended with modern American cuisine. The personalized touches that only a mother with decades of culinary expertise could provide. My restaurant chain, Pearl Garden, was well known throughout New England as the premier choice for innovative Asian fusion cuisine. I had worked my way up from a food truck on the streets of Providence to personally catering for celebrities, tech billionaires, and even a former vice president. Despite my success, I maintained the same humble approach that had gotten me this far, wearing my grandmother's jade pendant at every restaurant opening for good luck, keeping my fingernails short for kitchen work, and speaking with the slight accent I never could quite shake from my childhood in rural Fujian province. The first time I catered a wedding alone, I was 6 months pregnant with James. His father had left just weeks before, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility of a child and disappearing with our small savings. I stood in that rental kitchen, swollen ankles and aching back, determined that my child would never know the hunger and uncertainty that had marked my own childhood in China. I worked 18-hour days, hired talented staff who shared my vision, saved every penny, and slowly built my reputation for extraordinary food that told a story on every plate. By James's 10th birthday, I had enough to buy our first home in a good school district. By his high school graduation, I could afford to send him to any university he chose. He selected Yale, followed by Columbia Business School, where he met Elise Cavendish, heiress to the Cavendish shipping and real estate fortune. When they got engaged, I cried tears of joy, believing I had succeeded in giving my son the life I had dreamed for him. A life where doors opened easily, where people spoke to him with respect rather than the dismissive tones I had endured for years as an immigrant woman in America. That dream shattered on a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. It was James calling from his luxury downtown Boston apartment that I had helped him furnish. "Mom, we need to talk about the wedding," he said, his voice unnaturally formal. Elise's parents are very particular. They're old New England money, and everything needs to be perfect. I smiled to myself, thinking he was about to ask for my professional help with the menu arrangements. After all, I had offered countless times since their engagement, but they had insisted on hiring Madeline's, the most expensive catering company in the region. "What do you need, sweetie? You know I can handle anything food-related," I said. "Remember the governor's fundraiser last year? We had to replace an entire seafood display with just 3 hours' notice when—" "Mom, stop," James interrupted, an edge to his voice I rarely heard. "That's actually what I need to discuss with you." His silence lingered a beat too long. Could hear him take a deep breath. "I think it would be better if you didn't help with the wedding. In fact, the Cavendishes have requested that you maintain a low profile during the ceremony and reception." I gripped the edge of my kitchen island, stunned. "I don't understand, James. What exactly does low profile mean?" "The Cavendishes have certain expectations," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They expect refinement." "Refinement?" I echoed, not comprehending. "Richard and Victoria specifically asked if you would be willing to sit in the back rows during the ceremony, and they've suggested you might not be included in the official photography." I forced a laugh. "That's ridiculous. I'm your mother. Of course I'll be in your wedding photos." Another painful silence. "Mom, that's the thing. I don't think you should be in the photos." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank down onto a kitchen stool, my knees suddenly weak. "What are you saying?" "Victoria expressed concerns after meeting you at the engagement dinner," James continued, sounding more like a corporate lawyer than my son. "She felt you might not fit in with their circle. She mentioned your accent, your stories about the restaurant, the way you insisted on helping the waitstaff clear plates." "That's just being considerate," I whispered. "It's embarrassing, Mom," James said, his voice hardening. "You don't understand how these people operate. Everything is about appearances. Richard's father is being considered for appointment to the Federal Maritime Commission. The wedding will be full of people who could influence his appointment. And I would embarrass you," I finished for him, the realization spreading through. "Me like ice water." "Not just me," he insisted. "You would feel uncomfortable too. These people can be cruel to outsiders. I'm protecting you as much as myself." Protecting me? After everything I had sacrificed to give him the advantages he now used to exclude me. I remembered the nights I'd slept on a cot in my restaurant kitchen because we couldn't afford both rent and daycare. The school events I'd missed when large. Catering jobs came in. The times I'd worn the same clothes for years so he could have new things for school. "James, I'm your mother," I said, my voice regaining its strength. "I raised you alone. I built a business for you. I've catered hundreds of events for families just as prominent as the Cavendishes. But you've never been a proper guest at those events," he replied coldly. "There's a difference between being the help and being family." The help. My own son had just called me the help. The words echoed in my mind for hours after James hung up. I sat at my kitchen island, surrounded by the wedding invitation samples I'd been collecting, staring at nothing. The antique wooden clock, a housewarming gift I'd bought with my first big catering profit, ticked away the minutes as I struggled to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Text messages from James. "Please try to understand. This is about my future. Richard's family has expectations. I need to meet them. I'll come visit you after the honeymoon. We can celebrate privately." I couldn't bring myself to respond. What could I possibly say? That I understood him rejecting me on what should have been one of the most important days we would share. That I accepted being erased because my working hands and Chinese accent might embarrass my son's new family? Around midnight, I finally moved from the kitchen to my home office. This room had been the heart of my business for decades. Walls lined with photographs of elaborate banquets I'd created, shelves filled with thank you notes from satisfied clients, and a large calendar perpetually marked with upcoming events. In the corner stood a small lacquered box hidden behind a painting of the rice terraces where I'd grown up. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside lay a stack of documents and my grandmother's jade pendant, the one I'd worn to every restaurant, opening for good luck. The vibrant green stone set in gold had traveled with my grandmother from rural China during the Cultural Revolution, then to me when I came to America as a teenager. I'd promised it to James when he was just a boy, letting him hold it in his small hands as he sat in my lap. "When you get married, this will be yours to give to your bride," I'd told him. "It has protected our family through hard times, and it will protect yours too." "It's so pretty, Mama," he'd whispered, handling it with reverence. I closed the jade pendant in my palm, feeling its cool weight. Next to it lay the more practical gift I'd been planning, the deed to my newest restaurant property in downtown Boston, valued at just over $3.8 million. I had been preparing for years to transfer ownership to James after his wedding. Though he'd chosen business over culinary arts, the property would provide him with substantial rental income and a legacy he could eventually pass down to his own children. My financial advisor had helped me structure everything. James would become the owner, while my trusted executive chef and operations director would handle day-to-day functions. He would receive quarterly distributions without having to be involved in operations. I would stay on as a consultant for 2 years, then retire completely. It was supposed to be my ultimate gift to him. Financial independence from both me and his new in-laws. My gaze drifted to the third document on my desk, a cashier's check for $250,000, my contribution to his wedding and the down payment on whatever home he and Elise chose after their honeymoon. It represented nearly all of my liquid savings. But I hadn't hesitated. What else was money for, if not to give my son the perfect start to his married life? I had planned to present all 3 gifts at the rehearsal dinner. I'd even written a speech, something heartfelt about how proud I was of the man he'd become. How all my years of hard work had been worth it to see him so happy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I could almost hear the clinking of glasses, the polite applause from guests who would finally see me as more than just the immigrant woman who prepared their meals. Now that vision dissolved into nothing. I pulled out my phone and reread James's texts, each one cutting deeper than the last, revealing the unbridgeable gap between us. When had this happened? When had my little boy, who once proudly told his elementary school class that his mom made the most delicious dumplings in the whole wide world, become ashamed of me? Was it during his years at Yale, surrounded by classmates who vacationed in the Hamptons and had family names on university buildings? Or perhaps at Columbia Business School, where his background became something to overcome rather than celebrate? Or was it only after meeting Elise, whose mother collected designer handbags rather than kitchen knives, whose father's hands had never known a day of hard labor? I remembered the engagement dinner clearly. I'd worn my best dress, a simple but elegant black sheath that had cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing. I'd practiced speaking more slowly to minimize my accent. I'd even paid for a professional blowout at an upscale salon, trying to tame my naturally wavy hair into something sleeker, more sophisticated. Victoria Cavendish had greeted me with a perfectly practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "So lovely to finally meet you," she'd said, her gaze flicking briefly to my hands that told the story of my life through slight calluses and short nails, kept practical rather than polished. "James speaks so highly of your cooking," she'd said, pronouncing cooking the way one might say hobby, diminishing my entire career to something quaint and inconsequential. Throughout the dinner, I'd felt increasingly invisible. The Cavendishes discussed their recent trip to Monaco, their membership at the Bayview Harbor Club, the charity gala where they'd been seated near a prominent senator. They asked James thoughtful questions about his investment firm, complimenting his recent promotion to junior partner. They engaged Elise in comfortable banter about her environmental law practice and tennis game. Not once did they direct a meaningful question to me beyond the perfunctory, "And how is your restaurant business?" before moving swiftly onward. When I'd attempted to join the conversation, mentioning that I'd catered an event at that very same club they frequented, Victoria had smiled tightly before turning to ask the server for more sparkling water. Later, when I'd instinctively begun helping clear plates between courses, a habit formed from years in the service industry, I'd caught James's mortified expression. He'd tugged my arm gently, whispering, "Mom, please sit down. You're not working." Tonight, I'd laughed it off then, but the memory stung sharply now. In trying to help, I'd embarrassed him. In being myself, I'd become a liability. The next morning, I called my attorney, Robert Miller. He'd handled my business matters for 12 years and was one of the few people who knew exactly how much I'd sacrificed to build my company. "Olivia, it's been a while. How are you?" His warm voice was a balm to my raw emotions. "I need to make some changes to my estate planning," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "The documents regarding James." "The business transfer? Is something wrong?" "Everything's fine," I lied. "But I've been thinking about my legacy, and I'd like to make some adjustments." We scheduled a meeting for the following day. That night, I barely slept. wrestling with the decision taking shape in my mind. Was I being petty? Vindictive? Or was I finally seeing my relationship with my son clearly for the first time? By morning, I knew what I had to do. James had made his choice. He'd decided that the mother who had given him everything wasn't good enough to stand beside him as he married into Connecticut's elite. He wanted the advantages my hard work had provided without the embarrassment of acknowledging where they came from. I would not force my presence where it wasn't wanted, but neither would I continue pouring my heart, soul, and finances into someone who viewed me as something shameful to be hidden away. At Robert's office, I laid out my new instructions. The $250,000 check would be voided. The business property would not be transferred to James, but placed in a trust with specific conditions. The jade pendant would remain in my possession. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Robert asked, concern evident in his expression. He had watched James grow up, had seen firsthand how I'd built my life around his happiness. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, signing where he indicated. "James has made it clear that he's embarking on a new life, one where I don't belong. I need to respect his decision and make some decisions of my own." As I left his office, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in over 20 years, I was thinking about what I wanted, not what James needed. It was terrifying and liberating, all at once. That evening, I finally responded to James's texts with a single message. "I understand your position and will respect your wishes. You don't need to worry about me attending the wedding photos." His reply came almost instantly. "Thank you for understanding, Mom. This means a lot to me. I'll call you soon." No apology. No acknowledgement of what he was asking me to give up. Just relief that I wouldn't be there to embarrass him in front of the Cavendishes. I set down my phone and walked to my home office, where a large whiteboard dominated one wall. It was where I'd always planned my major restaurant events, mapping out every detail to ensure perfection. Now I wiped it clean and wrote at the top in bold letters, "My next chapter." For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to dream of something other than James's future. And, surprising even myself, I found I had dreams of my own waiting to be discovered. 2 weeks until James's wedding. The date, May 15th, had been circled on my calendar in red for nearly a year. Now it loomed like a deadline rather than a celebration. I found myself staring at it during breakfast, during my evening glass of wine, during the sleepless hours when doubts and regrets tend to surface. The Sunday edition of the Rhode Island Gazette lay open on my kitchen table, folded to the Society page. There it was in elegant script. Cavendish Chen wedding promises to be season's most anticipated affair. The article detailed the exclusive venue, the designer behind Elise's gown, the string quartet that would play during the ceremony. It mentioned Richard's illustrious family history, his Harvard education, his position on several prestigious boards. James was described as a rising star in Boston financial circles, graduate of Columbia Business School, son of Olivia Chen. Just that. No mention of my business, my achievements, or the fact that I'd raised him single-handedly. I was reduced to a name, an afterthought, while the Cavendish pedigree was chronicled back 3 generations. I closed the newspaper and pushed it away. No point torturing myself with these details. I had made my peace with not being in the wedding photos, or at least I was trying to. My phone rang, displaying the familiar logo of Pearl Garden. It was Sunday. All of my restaurants were open for brunch, but my executive staff handled weekend operations. Something must be wrong. "Olivia speaking," I answered, grateful for the distraction. "Ms. Chen, I'm so sorry to bother you on a Sunday." It was Marcus, my operations director for the past 7 years. His voice carried the tension of someone about to deliver unwelcome news. "What's happened? Is it the Boston location? The health inspector wasn't due until next week." "No, All restaurant operations are proceeding normally, Marcus assured me. It's about the Cavendish Chen wedding. My grip tightened on the phone. What about it? We're not catering that event. That's just it, Ms. Chen. Victoria Cavendish called our main office about an hour ago. She was quite upset. Apparently, Madeline's has had to cancel due to a fire in their commissary kitchen last night. No one was hurt, but they've had to cancel all events for the next month. A surge of vindication flashed through me, quickly replaced by concern. A kitchen fire could have injured people and certainly would cause enormous financial damage to the business. And Mrs. Cavendish wanted to know if we could step in, I concluded, already knowing where this was headed. Yes, she specifically asked if we could take over the catering with just 2 weeks' notice. She mentioned it would be for 250 guests, seated dinner, premium package. That would be at least $350 per person, totaling $87,500 minimum, not including the wedding cake, champagne toast, or open bar. One of our largest potential contracts of the season. I see. My mind raced, professional instincts warring with maternal hurt. And what did you tell her? That I would need to consult with you immediately. She's expecting a call back within the hour. She seemed desperate. I nearly laughed out loud. Victoria Cavendish, who had looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her designer shoe, was now desperate for my help. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thank you, Marcus. I'll handle this personally. After hanging up, I paced my kitchen, torn between contradictory impulses. The businesswoman in me recognized an excellent opportunity, not just for the revenue, but for the connections and prestige such a high-profile event would bring. The mother in me still smarted from rejection, from being deemed too embarrassing, to appear in my only son's wedding photos. I glanced at the calendar again, May 15th. In my 25 years of running restaurants, I had never turned down a client due to personal feelings. My reputation was built on professionalism, reliability, and the ability to create memorable dining experiences regardless of circumstances. Could I do it? Could I prepare a magnificent feast for my son's wedding? A wedding where I'd be excluded from the photographs? Would orchestrating the perfect meal from behind the scenes be enough? With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the Cavendish estate. A housekeeper answered, then quickly transferred me when I identified myself. Victoria's voice came through crisp and controlled, but with an undercurrent of anxiety I hadn't heard before. Ms. Chen, thank you for returning my call so promptly. I trust your manager explained our situation. He did. I understand you're in need of catering services for James and Elise's wedding. Yes. A pause. It's most unfortunate, the timing, of this incident with our original caterer. But these things happen, I suppose. These things happened when you hired inferior services based on appearances rather than reputation, I thought but didn't say. Fortunately, I continued, keeping my voice professionally pleasant, we do have availability on May 15th. We had declined to book anything on that date some months ago. A half-truth. I had blocked out James's wedding day on my calendar because I had planned to attend as mother of the groom. Even after being excluded from the photos, I hadn't had the heart to schedule another event. Oh, that is fortunate indeed, relief colored Victoria's tone. I've heard excellent things about your company's work. James speaks very highly of your cuisine. Cuisine, as if I ran a quaint hobby rather than an award-winning restaurant empire. We take great pride in our work, I replied, allowing a hint of steel to enter my voice. My team can certainly accommodate your needs, though the timeline is unusually tight. We typically require a minimum of 6 weeks for events of this scale. Yes, of course, and we would expect to pay a premium for the rush accommodation, Victoria said hurriedly. Money is no object. The important thing is ensuring the day proceeds flawlessly. For James, the words hung unspoken between us. I understand completely. In fact, given my personal connection to the groom, I would insist on overseeing every detail myself. A lengthy silence followed. Ms. Chen, Victoria finally said, her voice lowered as if sharing a confidence. I feel I should be direct. James has expressed concerns about your presence at the wedding creating potential awkwardness. I'm aware of James's wishes, I replied evenly. To be clear, I'm offering my professional services, not requesting a revision to the photography arrangements. My team and I would remain entirely behind the scenes. Most guests would never even know I was there. Another pause. I could almost hear her weighing her limited options. Very well, she conceded, but I must insist that you remain in the kitchen or preparation areas. It would be unfortunate if James were distracted on his special day. Distracted, as if seeing his mother would ruin his wedding, I swallowed the hurt and focused on maintaining my professional demeanor. Of course. Now, regarding the menu, I'll need to know if James and Elise have any specific preferences. We typically offer a tasting session, but given the timeline. That won't be necessary, Victoria interrupted. James mentioned your signature dishes, the tea-smoked duck and that sea bass preparation. Beyond that, we trust your expertise. As I said, cost is no concern. We simply want the best. The very best, which apparently now included my services, after their first choice had failed them. Very well, I'll have a contract and preliminary menu prepared by tomorrow morning for your review. We'll require a 50% deposit to begin work, with the balance due the day before the event. That's acceptable, Victoria agreed, sounding relieved. And Ms. Chen, thank you for your discretion in this matter. I'm sure you understand this is what's best for James. I ended the call before trust gave way to truth, before I could ask how humiliating a son could possibly be what's best for him, before I could demand to know what right Victoria had to judge me when she had never worked a day in her life. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting what would be the most important catering contract of my career. The menu would be flawless, innovative yet elegant, memorable without being ostentatious. I would create dishes that complemented the venue, the season, the formality of the occasion. For the next few hours, I lost myself in the familiar comfort of planning. I selected premium ingredients, designed course progressions, contemplated wine pairings. This was my element, the place where I still had control, where my expertise was undeniable. By evening, I had outlined a culinary experience worthy of royalty. 6 courses, beginning with an amuse-bouche of hamachi with yuzu gel, progressing through seasonal soups and salads to a choice of 3 entrees, followed by a cheese course and dessert buffet that would complement the wedding cake. The cake. James had always loved my black sesame cake with vanilla bean buttercream and seasonal fruit. As a little boy, he had begged for it at every birthday. Would he want it for his wedding? Or would that be another reminder of his embarrassing immigrant mother? I closed my laptop without including the cake in my proposal. Let Victoria ask if James wanted it, I wouldn't presume. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone pinged with a text from James. Mom, I heard you're catering the wedding now. Thank you for helping us out of this jam. I really appreciate you staying behind the scenes like we discussed. It means a lot to me and the Cavendishes. No acknowledgement of the pain he had caused me. No recognition of the irony that I was now good enough to cook for his wedding, but not good enough to appear in his wedding photos. Just gratitude that I would remain, hidden like a shameful secret. I didn't respond. What could I possibly say that wouldn't lead to an argument? That wouldn't make me the difficult, embarrassing mother he already believed me to be? Instead, I placed my phone on the nightstand and turned out the light. In the darkness, I allowed myself to imagine an alternate reality, one where James proudly introduced me to the Cavendishes, where my work was respected rather than hidden, where I stood beside my son in his wedding photos wearing my grandmother's jade pendant, watching him begin his new life. The fantasy brought no comfort, only a renewed sense of determination. If I couldn't stand beside my son in his wedding photos as his mother, I would ensure that my presence was felt in every bite, every carefully plated dish, every moment of culinary perfection. They might not see me, but they would taste my legacy. And perhaps, just perhaps, James would finally understand what he had rejected. The contract with the Cavendishes was signed and returned the very next day, along with a deposit check that made even my experienced accountant raise an eyebrow. Victoria had approved my proposed menu without a single change, unusual for a client of her exacting standards. Her desperation was showing. For the next 10 days, I threw myself into preparations. My staff noticed the intensity with which I approached this particular event, though none dared ask why. Only Marcus, who had been with me for the past 7 years, ventured to broach the subject as we finalized the sauce recipes. "Olivia," he said quietly, tasting a sample of miso beurre blanc. "Are you sure you want to do this? We could send the team without you." I adjusted the seasoning, considering the balance of salt and acidity before responding. "It's just another job, Marcus." He gave me a look that said he knew better. "It's your son's wedding, a wedding where you've been asked to stay out of sight." I busied myself with the flame under a simmering dashi broth. "Things change. Business is business. And hearts get broken," he countered gently. "I've known you too long to believe you're just doing this for the money or the connections." I met his gaze finally. "I'm doing it because it's what I do. I create beautiful experiences, even for people who don't appreciate the hands that serve them." Marcus nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite articulate. This was my way of being present at my son's wedding, my final gift to him, even if he didn't deserve it. 3 days before the wedding, while supervising the preparation of items that could be made in advance, I received a text from James. "Can you come to the venue tomorrow afternoon? The wedding planner wants to discuss some layout details with you, and I'd like to talk about the cake." So, he did want my cake after all. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there at 2 p.m., professional and detached." The Cavendish Chen wedding was being held at Bayview Harbor Club, one of the most prestigious venues in Rhode Island. Set on 30 acres of manicured grounds with a private beach, the historic mansion had been converted into an exclusive club, and event space that typically required membership to book for private events. The Cavendishes had been members for generations. As I drove through the imposing gates the following afternoon, I couldn't help but admire the venue's elegance. Hydrangeas and roses lined the circular driveway, their scent filling the air as I parked my car, not my restaurant van with the Pearl Garden logo, but my personal vehicle, a modest luxury sedan. I had dressed carefully in a tailored charcoal pantsuit that concealed rather than highlighted my curves, paired with modest heels, and simple gold studs, not my grandmother's jade, but tasteful nonetheless. My hair was pulled back into a sleek chignon. My makeup subtle but flawless. I looked every inch the successful businesswoman I was, not the embarrassing mother James seemed to fear. A young woman in a crisp suit greeted me at the entrance. "Ms. Chen, I'm Diana from Palmer Events. We're coordinating the wedding. Thank you for coming." She led me through the club's grand foyer into a sunroom overlooking the harbor where James sat with a slender woman in her 50s, whom I recognized as the wedding planner. No sign of Victoria Cavendish or Elise, thankfully. James looked up. When I entered, his expression a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, wariness, and something else I couldn't quite place. Guilt, perhaps. "Mom, you're here," he said, standing. For a moment, I thought he might embrace me, but he simply gestured to an empty chair. "This is Diana Palmer, our wedding planner." Diana extended a manicured hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Ms. Chen. Your reputation precedes you." "Likewise," I replied, taking the offered seat. I believe we crossed paths at the governor's ball last year, though we didn't have the chance to speak directly. Yes, your sea base was the highlight of the evening, she acknowledged with professional courtesy. Now, regarding Saturday's event, we need to coordinate timing for service with the reception schedule. For the next 45 minutes, we discussed logistics, when courses would be served, how long to allow between them, which entree required tableside preparation. James remained largely silent, occasionally nodding but offering little input. This was clearly Diana's domain, and by extension, Victoria's. When we had covered everything, Diana gathered her notes. I believe that's all I needed. If you'll... Excuse me, I need to check on the floral delivery. She exited gracefully, leaving James and me alone for the first time since his fateful phone call. An awkward silence stretched between us. James fidgeted with his platinum watch, a graduation gift from the Cavendishes that must have cost more than my first food truck. You wanted to discuss the cake, I prompted finally. Yes. He seemed relieved to have a safe topic. I was hoping you might make your black sesame cake. It's always been my favorite. Of course, I kept my voice neutral. Single tier for cutting, with sheet cakes in the kitchen for serving? Actually, James hesitated. I was hoping for a traditional tiered cake. Victoria selected a design. He slid a magazine across the table, opened to a page featuring an elaborate 5-tier cake adorned with sugar flowers and metallic accents. I studied the image. It was ostentatious, clearly chosen to impress rather than for taste. This will serve about 300, I noted. I thought your guest list was 250. Victoria likes the drama of a large cake, James admitted, not meeting my eyes. A cake chosen by Victoria at a wedding where I wasn't welcome in the photos. The irony wasn't lost on me. I can recreate this design with your favorite flavors, I confirmed, keeping my tone professional. It will be ready for delivery at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Thank you. James twisted his watch again. And Mom, I really do appreciate you stepping in like this. It means a lot to the Cavendishes. To the Cavendishes, not to him. I stood gathering my notes. If there's nothing else, I should get back to the kitchen. We have quite a bit of preparation still to do. James looked up, something like panic flashing in his eyes. Actually, would you mind walking the grounds with me for a few minutes? I'd like to show you where the cocktail hour will be held so you can plan your serving stations. It was a flimsy excuse. Diana had already provided detailed floor plans, but I nodded anyway. We walked in silence through French doors onto a stone terrace that overlooked immaculately landscaped gardens sloping down to the harbor. A white pavilion had been erected near the water's edge, presumably for the ceremony. It's beautiful, I offered, trying to ease the tension. Mom, James began abruptly, there's something I need to tell you. I braced myself, unsure what new hurt might be coming. Elise and I, he faltered. We've been having some difficulties. This wasn't what I'd expected. What kind of difficulties? James leaned against the stone balustrade, suddenly looking very young and uncertain. Her family is complicated. There are expectations I didn't fully understand when we got engaged. What kind of expectations? I asked carefully. Financial ones mostly, he sighed. The Cavendishes have wealth, but it's tied up in trusts and family companies. Richard's monthly allowance to Elise barely covers their membership dues. The wedding is costing a fortune, and her parents expect us to maintain a certain lifestyle afterward, but they're not actually providing the means to do it. I thought of the check I'd voided, the one that would have given them $250,000 to start their married life. James had no idea how close he'd come to having that security. And, this is causing problems between you and Elise? I prompted. She thinks I should ask you for help, he admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. She knows your restaurants are successful, and she thinks since you're, from humbler beginnings, You must have cash saved rather than tied up in investments. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about me embarrassing James. This was about money, the Cavendish's money, or rather the appearance of it. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You excluded me from your wedding photos because the Cavendishes were embarrassed by my background, but they expected you to ask me for money?" James looked away. "It's more complicated than that." "Enlighten me," I said, my voice hardening. "Richard's father is being considered for appointment to the Federal Maritime Commission, but there have been questions about their finances. They need this wedding to project success and stability, to have the right people see them in the right light. And I'm not the right light," I concluded. "Mom, you don't understand how these people think. Everything is about appearances. The right schools, the right clubs, the right family connections. And you want to be part of that world so badly that you're willing to cut me out of your photographs?" The hurt I'd been suppressing bubbled to the surface. The mother who raised you alone, who built a business from nothing to give you everything they were born into. James had the grace to look ashamed. "It's not about cutting you out. It's about fitting in. Elise loves me, but her parents..." "Her parents what?" I pressed. "They had concerns about my background, about who I come from." He hesitated. "About being associated with a family that isn't established." There it was, the ugly truth I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. James wasn't just embarrassed by me. He was trying to erase me, to reinvent himself as someone worthy of the Cavendish name. "I see." I felt strangely calm, as if watching the scene from outside my body. "And now that you need my professional services and potentially my financial support, I'm acceptable again." "That's not fair," James protested weakly. "No. What's not fair is raising a son who becomes ashamed of the very person who gave him everything." I straightened my shoulders. "James, I will cater your wedding because I signed a contract and I honor my commitments. I will make you the most beautiful cake anyone at your wedding has ever tasted. But I will not give you money to maintain a facade for people who think I'm not good enough to be seen in their precious photos." James's face crumpled. "Mom, please, you don't understand what's at stake here." "I understand perfectly." I turned to leave, then paused. "You know, when I started my business, I had nothing but a used wok and recipes my grandmother taught me. No one believed in me except you, a 5-year-old who thought his mama's dumplings were magic. I built something from nothing because I wanted you to have opportunities I never had. I never imagined you'd be ashamed of how those opportunities came to you." James reached for my arm. "I'm not ashamed of you. I'm just trying to adapt to their world. A world that judges people by their pedigree rather than their character isn't a world worth adapting to," I replied. "But that's your choice to make, just as it's my choice to decide what I will and won't accept from my son." As I walked away, I heard James call after me, his voice small and uncertain. "Mom, what about the cake?" "The cake will be perfect," I called back without turning around. "It's what I do." Driving back to my restaurant, I felt oddly lighter, as if a burden I'd been carrying had finally been set down. The truth hurt, but it was clarifying. James hadn't rejected me because I was embarrassing. He'd rejected me because I represented a past he wanted to erase, a background that didn't fit with his aspirational future. And the Cavendishes, they were happy to benefit from my labor while judging me unworthy of appearing in their precious photographs. The hypocrisy was staggering. By the time I reached my kitchen, a plan had begun to form. Not a plan for revenge or public humiliation, but for something more powerful. Truth. The kind of truth that could only be served by someone who knew exactly how to make an impression that lasted. That night, I couldn't sleep. My conversation with James kept replaying in my mind, each word sharper in memory than when first spoken. I finally gave up around 3 a.m., wrapping myself in my mother's old silk robe and settling into the window seat in my bedroom that overlooked the garden. The moon cast silver light across the herbs I'd planted: Thai basil, cilantro, lemongrass, ingredients that had formed the foundation of my earliest dishes. My fingers traced the embroidered dragons on my robe's sleeve, each stitch a memory from my childhood in China. This robe, like so many things I cherished, told the story of where I came from. A story James was now desperate to erase. How had we arrived here? When had my son's ambition turned to shame? When had my heritage, the very thing that had given him opportunities, become something to hide? My mind drifted back 27 years to the day James was born. The Providence hospital room was bright, despite the rain beating against the window. I lay exhausted, a tiny bundle cradled against my chest, marveling at his perfect features. James Chen, 6 pounds 8 ounces, born at 4:15 a.m. after 19 hours of labor. "He's beautiful," the nurse said, adjusting my pillows. "Will your husband be back soon? He just stepped out for coffee." I didn't have the energy to correct her, to explain that David wasn't my husband and that he had walked out 2 months earlier when the pregnancy began to limit his freedom. That the last I'd heard, he was in California with a bartender, having emptied our joint savings account on his way out the door. "It's just us," I said instead, kissing James's downy head. The nurse's smile faltered slightly. "Well, you two? We'll do just fine." Alone with my newborn son, the enormity of my situation hit me fully. Me with a community college degree in hospitality management, $527 in my checking account, and a baby who depended on me for everything. The fear was overwhelming. "I promise," I whispered to James, "you will never want for anything. I will give you the world." I had no idea then how difficult that promise would be to keep, or how my success in keeping it would ultimately drive a wedge between us. Providence, 2002. "Mama, look! I made a tiger!" 5-year-old James proudly held up a paper plate mask decorated with orange crayon and yarn whiskers. His face paint from the Chinese New Year celebration at his elementary school was already smudging. "It's ferocious," I said, setting down the heavy tote bag filled with leftover dumplings I'd made for his class. The event had been a success, the children and teachers delighting in the food and cultural presentation I'd given. James had beamed with pride as I showed the class how to fold dumplings, his little hands already skillful from countless hours, in the kitchen with me. "Can we have our own celebration at home?" he asked, slipping his small hand into mine as we walked to the bus stop. We couldn't afford a car yet. "Of course. I saved some special dumplings just for us." "And can you tell me the tiger story again?" The Chinese zodiac tale was his favorite bedtime story. "As many times as you want." Later that night, after James was asleep, I sat at our tiny kitchen table working on my business plan. The food truck I dreamed of buying would cost $18,000 for even a used model. With my savings and a small loan from the Women's Business Association, I might be able to afford it by summer. The menu would feature my grandmother's recipes with contemporary twists, Fujian cuisine before I even knew the term. I'd been testing recipes at night after my shifts at the hotel restaurant, using James as my enthusiastic taste tester. At 5, he already had a sophisticated palate, offering earnest critiques. "More ginger, Mama," or "the sauce is too salty." Closing my accounting notebook, I checked on James one more time. He slept peacefully, his tiger mask on the nightstand, his stuffed panda clutched tight. Every sacrifice, the long hours, the missed sleep, the constant worry about money, all of it was worth it to give him a better life than mine had been. I didn't know then that my son would one day see our shared heritage not as a source of pride, but as an impediment to his social advancement. Boston, 2010. "Mom, I got in! I got in!" James burst through the door of our apartment, waving a thick envelope emblazoned with the logo of Westmore Academy, one of the most prestigious prep schools in New England. At 13, he was already showing signs of the handsome man he would become. Tall for his age, with my dark eyes but his father's stronger jaw, intelligence evident in his expression. Let me see. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the letter. Full academic scholarship to their high school program with a stipend for books and uniforms. This was what all our hard work had been building toward, my growing restaurant. Business now included 2 locations and had been featured in Boston Magazine. James's relentless studying and perfect grades opening doors I never could have imagined. Elias Cavendish goes there, James said, his eyes shining. His dad runs this huge shipping company. He said their dorms are like fancy hotel rooms and they have sailing lessons and Latin club and slow down, I laughed. This is wonderful news, but don't forget you'll be coming home on weekends. I'm not ready to give you up entirely to boarding school. James's excitement dimmed slightly. About that, most kids stay on campus for activities on weekends. It's kind of important for fitting in. It was the first hint of what was to come. The gradual pulling away, the slow transformation from a boy proud of his hard-working mother to a young man increasingly conscious of social hierarchies and where we fell within them. We'll work something. Out! I promised, hiding my hurt. This is your opportunity to build the foundation for your future. You'll come for Parents' Weekend, right? Even if you have events scheduled? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. I hugged him tightly, inhaling. The scent of his hair, no longer a little boy but not quite a man. I'm so proud of you, James. He squeezed me back. It's because of you, Mom. All those nights you helped me with homework even after standing in the kitchen all day. All the times you pushed me to try harder. His words warmed me, but I could already feel him slipping away, drawn toward a world I had never been part of, a world of old money and older names, of traditions and connections that no amount of hard work could replicate. That evening, we celebrated with a special dinner. I prepared all his favorites: soup dumplings, tea-smoked duck, mango pudding for dessert. As we ate, James peppered me with questions about Westmore. What to expect, how to behave, what to wear. Just be yourself, I advised. That's more than enough. He nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. Elias says the faculty can always tell who doesn't really belong there, the scholarship kids. Then show them exactly what a scholarship kid can do, I said firmly. Outwork them. Outsmart them, outshine them in every way, not to fit in, but to remind them that excellence doesn't come from privilege. It comes from determination. James smiled, momentarily reassured. But I recognized something in his expression that worried me. Hunger, not for food, but for acceptance. For belonging to a world that would never fully embrace him unless he shed the parts of himself that tied him to me. Boston, 2016. Mom, is my suit pressed? James called from his bedroom. The interview is at 4 and I need to leave in 30 minutes. I hung up from my call with a vendor and hurried to James's room where I'd laid out his navy blue interview suit an hour earlier. All ready to go, pressed and lint rolled. At 18, James was striking. Tall and self-assured, with impeccable manners and the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing he could hold his own in any situation. His college applications had all been submitted, but this interview was for a special scholarship at Columbia that would cover not just tuition, but living expenses as well. He emerged from the bathroom, hair perfectly styled and cologne applied sparingly. How do I look? Professional enough? You look perfect. I straightened his tie slightly. Columbia would be lucky to have you. He checked his appearance in the mirror, then frowned slightly. Mom, you're not planning to tell the interviewer about the restaurant, are you? I blinked, confused. Why would I? I'm just driving you there and waiting outside. It's just... He hesitated. Some of the other applicants come from really impressive backgrounds. Parents who are surgeons or professors or executives. Understanding dawned, leaving a cold feeling in my stomach. And you're worried that a restaurant owner mother might not measure up? No, I didn't mean... He sighed. I'm just nervous. These scholarships are so competitive, and I don't have the family connections some other applicants have. If they ask about your background, you tell them the truth, I said firmly. That you're the son of a first-generation immigrant entrepreneur who built something from nothing. That you've worked alongside me since you were old enough to fold a napkin, learning firsthand about business management, customer service, and perseverance. James nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. You're right. I'm overthinking. This? On the drive to Columbia, he was quiet, reviewing his notes and mentally preparing. I kept my eyes on the road, trying not to dwell on his earlier comments. He was just nervous, I told myself. He didn't mean to imply he was ashamed of me or our life together. As we pulled up to the imposing university building where his interview would take place, I saw several other applicants arriving with their parents, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, all exuding confidence and belonging. Maybe you should just drop me off, James suggested, not meeting my eyes. Parking will be impossible, and there's no need for you to wait around for 2 hours. I swallowed my hurt. If that's what you prefer. It's just more practical, he insisted, already opening his door. I'll text you when I'm done. I watched him walk away, shoulders back, chin high, every inch the confident Columbia applicant. In that moment, I recognized that James wasn't just seeking education or advancement. He was seeking transformation. He wanted to enter a world where his humble beginnings would be erased, where he would be accepted as belonging among the elite by birthright rather than by effort. And I, with my Chinese accent and working-class background, was a reminder of everything he wanted to leave behind. As dawn broke over my garden, bringing me back to the present, I wiped away tears I hadn't realized I'd been shedding. The signs had been there all along. James's gradual distancing, his reluctance to bring college friends to the restaurant, his increasingly rare mentions of my business in conversation. I had told myself he was just growing up, establishing his independence. But the truth was simpler and more painful. James had been embarrassed of me for years. The wedding photo exclusion wasn't a sudden rejection, but the culmination of a long, slow pulling away. And yet, I had continued to sacrifice, to support his dreams, to fund his ascent into a world that looked down on people like me. I had been so determined to give him everything I never had that I hadn't noticed when everything began to include a different kind of mother. The realization didn't diminish my love for him, but it clarified something important. I had been complicit in my own erasure, allowing James to compartmentalize me as a source of financial and practical support while hiding me from the life he was building. That ended now. I would cater his wedding as promised, with all the professionalism and excellence my reputation demanded. But I would no longer accept being treated as an embarrassment, a secret to be hidden away. It was time for James and the Cavendishes to see exactly who I was in all my unvarnished self-made glory. The day before James's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect May morning that promised ideal weather for the celebration to come. I had been up since 4 a.m., overseeing final preparations in my flagship restaurant's kitchen, where my team worked with practiced precision. Each person focused on their specific tasks, from sauce reductions to garnish preparations to packing transport containers designed to keep everything at the optimal temperature. "Olivia, these look exceptional," Marcus commented, inspecting the rows of appetizers awaiting their final garnish. "The scallop and duck pairings with the cherry reduction might be your best creation yet." I nodded distractedly, checking items off my master list. "Make sure they stay at exactly 38 degrees until service. Any warmer, and the sauce will lose structure." "We've got it under control," Marcus assured me. "You should head to the venue for the final walkthrough. We're right on schedule here." I hesitated, reluctant to leave my kitchen sanctuary for the emotional minefield that awaited at Bayview Harbor Club. Here, I was Chef Chen, the respected professional whose word was law. There, I would be the embarrassing mother, hidden away, like a shameful secret. "Go," Marcus insisted gently. "We've catered hundreds of weddings. I promise the kitchen won't explode while you're gone." "It's not the kitchen I'm worried about," I muttered, but I untied my apron nonetheless. "Call me immediately if there are any issues with the delivery vans. The transmission on the second one was making that noise again yesterday." 30 minutes. Later, I pulled into Bayview Harbor Club's service entrance, deliberately bypassing the main drive where florists, decorators, and musicians would be arriving through the grand gates. My car would remain hidden around back, just as I was expected. 2. The event coordinator, a harried young woman with a tablet and Bluetooth earpiece, greeted me with obvious relief. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. Mrs. Cavendish has been asking for you." "Has she?" I kept my voice neutral, though I couldn't imagine why Victoria would suddenly want to speak with me directly. Our communication had been limited to terse emails about menu adjustments and timing. "She's in the main ballroom with the decorator. I'll let her know you're here." "No need," I said, already heading toward the kitchen. "I should check the facilities first. Please tell Mrs. Cavendish I'll find her when I'm done." The kitchen was state-of-the-art, as expected from a venue of this caliber. 8-burner commercial ranges, multiple convection ovens, expansive prep areas, and walk-in refrigerators large enough to store everything we'd need. I was making notes about electrical outlet placement when I heard the distinctive click of expensive heels on tile. "There you are!" Victoria Cavendish's voice carried that particular blend of irritation and condescension I'd come to associate with her. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes. I turned, taking in her immaculate appearance. Blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, pale blue designer suit that probably cost more than a month's rent on my first apartment, pearls glittering at her ears and throat. She looked like wealth personified, every detail calculated to communicate status and breeding. "I apologize for the delay," I said, not sounding apologetic at all. "I needed to familiarize myself with the kitchen before our equipment arrives." She waved this away as irrelevant. "We need to discuss the champagne service. The ice sculpture was supposed to be delivered at noon, but they're saying it can't arrive until 4 CE, which is cutting it entirely too close." I blinked. "Ice sculpture? That wasn't in our contract." "Not your ice sculpture," she clarified impatiently. "The swan. Centerpiece for the champagne fountain. But since you'll have staff setting up in that area, I need to coordinate timing." "I see." I made a note on my tablet. "We'll ensure our staff works around the delivery. Is there anything else?" Victoria hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. "Yes, actually. It's about the service staff." "Is there a problem with my team?" I asked, a protective edge entering my voice. My staff was impeccably trained and professional. "Not exactly. It's just..." She glanced around as if worried about being overheard. "James mentioned that you often work alongside your staff at events. I want to make sure that won't be happening. Tomorrow." Ah, there it was. The real reason for this conversation. "Mrs. Cavendish," I said carefully, "I typically supervise all aspects of service for events of this caliber. It ensures quality control." "Yes, well..." She straightened her already perfect posture. "In this case, I must insist that you remain entirely behind the scenes. Many of our guests are, shall we say, persons of influence, federal appointees, state representatives, business leaders. It would be awkward if they were to see you serving food at your son's wedding." The casual cruelty of her words hung in the air between us. Not, it would be awkward for James if his mother were seen serving food, but awkward for the Cavendishes and their prestigious guests to be confronted with the reality of who I was, a working woman who wasn't ashamed to Do whatever needed doing. I understand completely, I said, my voice cool and professional. Rest assured, Mrs. Cavendish, I have no intention of embarrassing James tomorrow. I will oversee operations from the kitchen, and our service staff will handle all guest interactions. Relief visibly washed over her. Excellent. Then I believe everything is in order. Almost. I consulted my tablet again. There's the matter of the final payment. The contract stipulates balance due today, and I haven't received it yet. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Richard is handling that. I believe he planned to stop by your office later today. My office will be closed as we're preparing for tomorrow's event, I replied. However, I accept cashier's checks or wire transfers. I'll need the balance before we begin setup at 9 a.m. I'm sure that won't be a problem, she said smoothly, though something in her expression suggested otherwise. Richard will contact you directly to arrange it. As if summoned by his name, a tall silver-haired man in a bespoke suit appeared in the kitchen doorway. Richard Cavendish Sr. looked exactly like an older version of the photographs I'd seen of him. Same aquiline nose, same confident bearing, same air of entitled expectation. Victoria, the florist has a question about the ceremony arrangements, he said before noticing me. Ah, you must be Ms. Chen. Olivia Chen. I extended my hand briefly. Pearl Garden Restaurants. Richard Cavendish. He shook my hand with practiced charm. I understand we have you to thank for saving our celebration after that unfortunate business with Madeleine's. Happy to help, I replied neutrally. Your wife and I were just discussing the final payment due today. Yes, about that. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes turned calculating. I was hoping we might discuss a slight adjustment to the terms. I had been in business long enough to recognize the opening move in a negotiation I hadn't agreed to. The terms were set in the contract both parties signed, I said evenly. The balance of $43,250 is due today. Richard chuckled as if I'd said, something amusing. Of course, but given the circumstances and the family connection, I thought perhaps we might discuss a family discount. A family discount? I repeated the words flatly. Nothing substantial. Say 15%. After all, this is your son's wedding. His tone suggested he was being incredibly generous in making this offer, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity to reduce my fee. I looked from Richard to Victoria, who was studiously examining her manicure, and felt a sudden clarity. This, finally, was the real Cavendish family. Wealthy in appearance, but trying to save $6,562.50 by leveraging my maternal feelings. The same people who deemed me too embarrassing to appear in their son's wedding photos were now expecting special treatment because of our family connection. The irony was almost too perfect. Mr. Cavendish, I said evenly, Pearl Garden does not offer discounts based on family connections. In fact, given the rush nature of this contract and the premium ingredients requested, I would normally have charged a 20% premium above our standard rate. I waived that out of consideration for James. His smile disappeared. Now, see here. The contract price stands, I continued firmly. Payment is due in full before setup begins tomorrow morning. If that presents a problem, I'm sure Diana can recommend several pizza delivery services that might be able to accommodate your event on short notice. Victoria gasped. You wouldn't dare. I'm a businesswoman, Mrs. Cavendish. I don't make threats. I state terms. The terms of our agreement are clear, and I expect them to be honored. Richard's face had reddened slightly, but he recovered quickly. No need to be difficult. I was merely suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement. There's nothing mutual about asking for free services, I pointed out, especially from someone you've deemed unsuitable to appear in your son's wedding photos. A tense silence followed as my words hit their mark. Victoria shifted uncomfortably while Richard's expression hardened into something more calculating. You're putting us in a difficult position, he said finally. Yes, it is, I agreed. And you're putting me in the position of having purchased $22,000 in premium ingredients and dedicated my entire staff to an event that you're now suggesting you might not pay for in full. I never said we wouldn't pay, he backpedaled quickly. I was simply exploring options. The option is to pay as agreed or cancel the contract, I stated. Those are the only choices available to you. Richard and Victoria exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Richard nodded stiffly. The payment will be made in full as agreed, he conceded. I'll have my assistant wire the funds this afternoon. Excellent, I said, allowing myself a small smile. Then I believe our business here is concluded for today. My team will arrive at 9 tomorrow morning to begin setup. As I turned to leave, Victoria called after me. And you'll remember our agreement about staying in the kitchen? I paused at the door. Mrs. Cavendish, I've been running successful restaurants for over 20 years. I know exactly where I belong. The statement hung in the air, loaded with meaning neither of them fully grasped. I did indeed know where I belonged, and it wasn't hiding in shame behind a kitchen door. Outside in the parking lot, I leaned against my car for a moment, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. The encounter had confirmed what I'd already suspected. The Cavendishes were more facade than substance. They had the trappings of wealth and the attitudes of privilege, but underneath lurked insecurity and financial strain they were desperate to hide. And James, my brilliant, ambitious son, had chosen their world of appearances over our world of authenticity. He had gambled his happiness on fitting into a family that measured worth by pedigree rather than character. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Cake layers all perfect, decorations on schedule. Everything under control here. At least something was going right. The cake, 5 tiers of black sesame perfection, would be my masterpiece. I had poured all my skill, all my artistry, all my complicated love for my son into its creation. Even if James never appreciated the hands that had crafted it, I knew it would be the finest cake I'd ever made. As I drove back to my restaurant, a plan began taking clearer shape in my mind. Not revenge, not sabotage. I would never compromise my professional standards or risk James's happiness, no matter how deeply he had hurt me. But perhaps there was a way to ensure that my presence at the wedding wasn't entirely erased. That the truth of who I was and what I had built couldn't be so easily dismissed. The Cavendishes wanted to hide me away, to pretend that James had emerged fully formed into their rarefied world without the stain of immigrant origins. But some truths couldn't be covered up with fancy clothes or prestigious connections. Tomorrow, I would make sure of that. The morning of James's wedding arrived with picture-perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, temperature hovering at an ideal 68 degrees. I had slept barely 2 hours, but adrenaline kept me sharp as I directed my team loading the catering. Vans. By 8:45 a.m., we were pulling into Bayview Harbor Club's service entrance, a well-orchestrated caravan of vehicles containing everything needed to feed 250 guests a 6-course gourmet meal. Equipment team first, I instructed as we parked. Refrigerated items second. Let's move. My staff responded with practiced efficiency, unloading warming cabinets, portable burners, and serving equipment. Within 30 minutes, we had transformed the venue's kitchen into a satellite version of our own, with stations set up for each course and backup systems in place for any possible contingency. The wire transfer came through. My accountant texted at 9:30. Full amount. At least the Cavendishes had honored that part of our agreement. I pushed thoughts of them aside and focused on what I did best, creating culinary perfection. By noon, preparations were well underway. The ceremony wouldn't begin until 4 p.m., but guests would start arriving at 3:30. We needed everything ready for the cocktail hour that would follow immediately after James and Elise exchanged vows. I was supervising the plating of appetizer components when Diana, the wedding planner, burst into the kitchen looking harried. Miss Chen, thank God you're here. We have a situation. What kind of situation? I asked, not looking up from the delicate quenelle of caviar I was placing atop a rice cracker. The florist delivered hydrangeas instead of peonies for the table arrangements. Mrs. Cavendish is, she lowered her voice, having what one might call a meltdown in the bridal suite. The ceremony is in 3 hours, and we have no centerpieces. I considered this for a moment. Technically, centerpieces weren't my problem. My contract covered food and service, nothing more. But I had more experience handling wedding crises than anyone else in the building. Tell Mrs. Cavendish that I can create food-based centerpieces if she's amenable, I offered. We brought extra materials for garnish that could be repurposed. Relief flooded Diana's face. That would be incredible. What did you have in mind? Small arrangements of fresh herbs, edible flowers, and seasonal fruits. Elegant, fragrant, and appropriate. For a dinner setting. They won't be traditional floral centerpieces, but they'll be beautiful. I'll suggest it immediately, Diana said, already heading for the door. Though she hesitated. Mrs. Cavendish may resist solutions coming from, well, from the help. I finished for her, my voice deliberately light. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I returned to my work. Make the offer or don't. Either way, my team and I will be ready when it's time to serve. 15 minutes later, Victoria Cavendish herself appeared in the kitchen doorway, her perfect composure, noticeably frayed around the edges. Her makeup couldn't quite conceal the redness around her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly. Ms. Chen, she began stiffly. Diana mentioned you might have a solution to our centerpiece disaster. I wiped my hands on a towel and approached her, maintaining a professional distance. I can create food-based arrangements using materials we already have on hand. They won't be what you originally envisioned, but they'll be elegant and appropriate, and we can have them ready in time. Food-based? Doubt colored her voice. I wouldn't have offered otherwise, I replied simply. She studied me for a long moment, calculation evident in her expression. Very well. I suppose we have no choice at this point. Actually, you do have choices, I corrected her. You could use candles alone or repurpose ceremony flowers, or even leave the tables without centerpieces entirely. People are here for James and Elise, not table decorations. Victoria looked startled, as if the idea that guests might not notice or care about centerpieces had never occurred to her. That's not... We can't possibly. Everything needs to be perfect. Perfect is a matter of perspective, Mrs. Cavendish. I turned to Marcus. Can you take over here? I'll work on the centerpieces. For the next hour, I channeled my creative energy into crafting 25 stunning arrangements. Each one a small work of art featuring rosemary sprigs, mint leaves, edible flowers, carved fruit, and twisted citrus peels, all anchored in crystal bowls with river stones I'd brought for an entirely different purpose. They were unconventional, but undeniably beautiful. When I finished the last one, I found Victoria hovering nearby, watching with poorly concealed amazement. These are... She seemed to struggle for words. These will do nicely. From Victoria Cavendish, this qualified as effusive praise. I'm glad they meet your approval, I said, keeping my voice neutral. My staff will place them once the tables are set. She nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say something more. After an awkward pause, she simply turned and left. No thank you. No acknowledgement of the extra effort I'd made to save her reception. Just the entitled expectation that of course I would fix her problem. I was the help, after all. At 2:30 p.m., I stepped outside for a brief moment of fresh air, needing to escape the controlled chaos of the kitchen. The ceremony space had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. White chairs with pale blue satin bows faced an elegant pergola draped with flowing fabric and white flowers. all overlooking the sparkling harbor. Soon, James would walk down that aisle with Victoria on his arm, the surrogate mother he'd chosen over his real one. No mother-son dance, no place at the family table, no proud tears as he exchanged vows. Just me in the kitchen making sure the duck skin was perfectly crisp. I was about to return inside when I spotted a familiar figure hurrying across the lawn. James, still in a casual shirt and slacks, his hair slightly disheveled, looking anxious. He was headed toward the main clubhouse, where I knew the groom's suite was located. Acting on instinct, I followed him. Whatever had him rushing around, with barely an hour before he needed to be dressed, might be something I could help with, mother of the groom or not. I knocked on the suite door, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. "James, is everything all right?" He whirled around, eyes wide with surprise. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be in the kitchen." "I saw you running across the grounds looking upset," I explained. "Is something wrong?" James's composed facade crumbled. "Everything's wrong. The best man's flight is delayed. The rings are still at the jeweler's because the engraving wasn't finished. And I just found out Richard's family trust isn't releasing funds for the house down payment we were counting on." He collapsed onto a leather ottoman, running his hands through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. This was the same way he'd expressed frustration since he was a little boy. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I have 45 minutes to finish getting ready, and I can't even find my cufflinks." I set aside all the hurt and rejection of the past weeks and simply became his mother again. "Let me help. Where did you last see your cufflinks?" "In my bag, I think. The monogrammed leather one Victoria gave me for Christmas." I found the bag in question and began methodically searching through its compartments. "And the rings? Who's picking them up from the jeweler?" "The best man was supposed to, but his flight from Chicago is delayed due to weather. The jeweler closes at 3 and no one else can go." "I can send Marcus," I said, locating the cufflinks in a side pocket. "He's already finished his prep work and he's reliable." I handed James the platinum squares engraved with his initials. He took them, relief evident on his face. "That would be amazing. Thank you." "And for the house down payment issue, is that something you need to resolve today?" James sighed. "No, but we close next week, and Elise doesn't know yet that the money isn't there. Her parents promised it to us as a wedding gift, but now Richard's saying the family trust administrator is being difficult about releasing the funds." My warning bells went off. This sounded less like a trust administrator being difficult and more like financial promises the Cavendishes couldn't actually fulfill. "That's a conversation for another day," I said gently. "Right now, let's focus on getting you married. I'll call Marcus about the rings. You finish dressing." As I texted the instructions to Marcus, the tension between James and me gradually eased. This was familiar territory. Me taking care of James, solving problems, making things right. For a little while, we could pretend that nothing had changed, that he hadn't excluded me from his wedding photos, that I was here as his mother rather than his caterer. "Mom," he said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "I need to tell you something." I continued straightening his tie, keeping my voice light. "What's that?" "Elise and I had a huge fight last night." His voice trembled slightly. "About money, about her parents, about you." I waited, letting him continue at his own pace. "She doesn't understand why I agreed to keep you out of the photos. She says it's cruel and unnecessary, especially since you're literally creating everything for the reception." This surprised me. I had assumed Elise was as concerned with appearances as her parents. "She might be the only Cavendish with a conscience," I remarked. James winced. "She's not like them, not really. She's been caught in the middle, trying to please her parents while also not wanting to hurt you." "And what about you, James? What do you want?" He looked at me directly for the first time. "I don't know anymore. I thought I wanted to belong in their world. The clubs, the connections, the pedigree. But it's also exhausting, constantly performing, constantly being judged. The price of admission is high, I agreed, especially when it requires you to erase who you really are. I know I've hurt you, he said quietly. And I'm sorry. I got so caught up in becoming someone the Cavendishes would accept that I forgot who I already was, who you raised me to be. The apology was a step, but it didn't erase the deeper issue. Why did you care so much what they thought? Your achievements stand on their own. You graduated from Yale and Columbia. You have a successful career. Why wasn't that enough? James looked away. Because no matter what I achieved, they still saw me as an outsider. Richard told me once that it takes 3 generations to make a gentleman. I wanted to speed up the process, I guess, to give my future children the acceptance I never had. At the cost of their grandmother, I said softly. He had no answer for that. A knock at the door interrupted us. Marcus stood there, slightly out of breath, holding a small blue velvet box. The rings, ma'am, picked up just as they were closing. Thank you, Marcus. You're a lifesaver. I took the box and handed it to James. I should get back to the kitchen, I said. We'll be starting service soon. James reached for my hand. Mom, wait. Please. Stay for the ceremony. Be part of the photos. It's not too late to fix this. A week ago, even a day ago, those words would have meant everything to me. But now they felt like too little, too late. I'm not sure it's that. Simple, James. The invitations have been sent, the schedule set, the Cavendishes' expectations established. I don't care about their expectations anymore, he insisted. This is my wedding, too. It's not just about the wedding, I said gently. It's about the choices you've been making for years. Choices that have made it clear how you see me, how you see our background. Before James could respond, the door opened again, and Richard Cavendish Sr. appeared, resplendent in his morning suit. James, you're not dressed yet? The photographer wants to start family portraits in 20 minutes. His gaze fell on me, and his expression cooled noticeably. Ms. Chen, I believe you're needed in the kitchen. The old James would have agreed, would have tacitly dismissed me to maintain peace with the Cavendishes. But something had shifted in my son. He straightened his shoulders and met his future father-in-law's gaze. Mom was helping me with some issues, including picking up the rings that were left at the jeweler. Richard looked momentarily flustered. Ah, well, thank you for that. But surely your staff can handle things now. Actually, James said, surprising me with the firmness in his voice, I've asked my mother to stay for the ceremony and to be included in the family photographs. Richard's face darkened. That wasn't the arrangement we discussed. Victoria has planned everything meticulously. The symmetry of the family groupings in the portraits. We'll be perfectly fine, James interrupted. My mother will be standing beside me where she belongs. A tense silence fell. I looked at my son with new eyes, seeing not just the ambitious young man eager to fit in, but glimpses of the confident, principled person I'd raised him to be. Richard's jaw tightened. I should remind you that there are certain expectations. I'm aware of your expectations, James cut in. And I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my relationship with my mother to meet them. Richard looked from James to me, calculation evident in his expression. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. After all, the ceremony is approaching, and there are many details to coordinate. There's nothing to discuss, James said firmly. My mother will be at the ceremony and in the photos. That's not negotiable. Richard's nostrils flared slightly, the only visible sign of his anger. I see. Well, we wouldn't want to upset the bride on her special day. If you'll excuse me, I need to inform Victoria of this adjustment. After he left, James turned to me, a mixture of defiance and uncertainty on his face. I meant what I said, "I want you there." "Are you sure? This could cause problems with the Cavendishes." "Let it," he said with surprising vehemence. "I'm tired of pretending, tired of trying to be someone I'm not, tired of hiding the person who made everything possible for me." His words warmed something in me that had been cold for too long, but caution tempered my response. "James, don't make this decision in the heat of the moment. You're about to marry into this family. There will be consequences." He looked at me directly, a maturity in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Then I'll face them. But I won't start my marriage by disrespecting my mother." Before I could respond, there was yet another knock at the door. This time it was Elise, already in her wedding dress, a stunning creation of silk and lace that highlighted her natural beauty. Her expression was troubled. "James? Your father just told me." She stopped when she saw me, and her face softened. "Ms. Chen, I'm so glad you're here." "Elise, you look beautiful," I said sincerely. "Thank you." She stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her. "And thank you for saving our reception. The centerpieces are exquisite." "You've seen them?" James asked, surprised. "I snuck a peek at the reception setup," she admitted. "I couldn't wait." She turned to me. "Ms. Chen, I want you to know that I never agreed with excluding you from the ceremony or the photographs. It was wrong, and I should have said something sooner." Her directness was refreshing, especially coming from a Cavendish. "I appreciate that, Elise. And please, call me Olivia." She nodded, then looked at James. "My father is having what can only be described as a controlled meltdown. He's threatening to withdraw support for the house if we disrupt the wedding plan." James's face hardened. He already has withdrawn it. The trust administrator mysteriously won't release the funds. Elise's eyes widened. "What? He didn't tell me that." She sat down heavily on the nearest chair. "So it was all a bluff? The house, the promises, everything?" "I don't know," James said gently. "But I'm starting to think your parents aren't as financially secure as they appear." Elise laughed without humor. "That would explain so much. The constant concern with appearances, the obsession with the right connections, the way they panicked when Madeline's canceled." I watched this exchange with growing interest. The facade of Cavendish perfection was cracking, revealing glimpses of the insecurity beneath. "Elise," I said carefully, "may I ask you something? Do you actually care about all this?" I gestured, vaguely to encompass the elaborate setting beyond the windows. The perfect society wedding, the appropriate photographs, the right connections. She considered the question seriously. "I care about marrying James. The rest is just theater. My parents' theater." She looked at James. "I'd marry you at the courthouse tomorrow if that's what you wanted." A smile spread across James's face. The first genuine one I'd seen in weeks. "Maybe we should. Elope, I mean. Skip all this." Elise laughed, a sound of surprised delight. "Can you imagine my father's face? Or we could just get through today," I suggested pragmatically. "But on your terms, not theirs." They both looked at me. "What do you mean?" James asked. "I mean, have the wedding you want, not the one the Cavendishes have scripted. Include who you want in the photos. Dance with who you want at the reception. Make this day about your choices, not theirs." Elise's expression became thoughtful. "You know, you're right. This is our wedding after all." She turned to James. "I want your mother in the family photos. I want her recognized properly as your mother, and I don't care what my parents think about it." James took her hand. "Are you sure? You're the one who has to deal with them after today." "I've been dealing with them my whole life," she said with surprising steel in her voice. "It's time they learn to deal with me, with us, on our terms." A knock at the door interrupted them. 15 minutes to ceremony," called a voice. James looked at me. "Mom, will you be there?" Not in the kitchen, but in the front row? Where you belong? The invitation, coming now with Elise's blessing, meant more than I could express, but I was still cautious. Your future in-laws might make this difficult. Let them try, Elise said with unexpected fierceness. This is our day, not theirs. I looked at these two young people, standing together against the weight of expectation and pretense, and felt a surge of pride in my son for finding his way back to his values, and in the woman he'd chosen, who seemed to have far more substance than her parents. Then yes, I said finally, I'll be there. As I left to change out of my chef's clothes, I caught a glimpse of Victoria and Richard in heated discussion with Diana near the ceremony area. Their controlled expressions couldn't quite mask their agitation. The perfect Cavendish wedding was veering off script, and they were scrambling to regain control. But for the first time since this whole wedding drama began, I felt a sense of peace. Whatever happened next would be authentic, not orchestrated. Real, not for show. And I would be part of it. Not as the caterer hidden away in the kitchen, but as the mother of the groom, visible, acknowledged, proud. I changed quickly in the small private bathroom attached to the kitchen, grateful that I'd packed a simple but elegant navy silk dress, a habit from years of catering events where I might need to make an appearance. The dress wasn't what I would have chosen had I known I'd be sitting in the front row, but it was appropriate and dignified. I fastened my grandmother's jade pendant around my neck, the green stone cool against my skin. It was comforting to have this small piece of my heritage with me, this symbol of where I came from that had traveled so far. When I emerged, Marcus raised an eyebrow but couldn't hide his smile. Change of plans, I explained. James has asked me to attend the ceremony. Can you oversee the final preparations? About time, he said, genuine pleasure lighting his features. And yes, everything's under control. The team knows exactly what to do. The duck is resting, the sauces are perfect, and the first course is ready for plating the moment the ceremony ends. Thank you, Marcus. I squeezed his arm gratefully. I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably work yourself into an early grave, he quipped. Now go. Be a mother today, not a chef. As I made my way toward the ceremony area, I spotted Victoria and Richard engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation with Diana. Victoria's eyes widened when she saw me approaching in my dress rather than my chef's uniform, her perfectly manicured hand rising to her throat in alarm. Ms. Chen, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. There appears to be some confusion about the arrangements. No confusion at all, I replied pleasantly. James has asked me to attend the ceremony as his mother, not as the caterer. Richard stepped forward, lowering his voice to avoid being overheard by guests who were beginning to arrive. His cologne, something expensive and subtle, couldn't quite mask the scent of whiskey on his breath. Liquid courage, perhaps. We had a clear understanding about your role today, he said, emphasizing each word as if speaking to someone who might not fully grasp English. Plans change, I said simply, maintaining my composure. And ultimately, this is James and Elise's wedding, not ours. This is highly irregular, Victoria protested, glancing nervously at the arriving guests in their designer outfits and expensive jewelry. The seating chart, the processional order, the photographs, everything is carefully arranged. I'm sure Diana can make the necessary adjustments, I replied, nodding to the wedding planner who looked like she wished she could disappear into the manicured shrubbery. After all, that's what wedding planners are for, handling last-minute changes. Richard's face darkened, the veneer of civility slipping. Ms. Chen, perhaps you don't understand the implications of disrupting arrangements that have been in place for months. There are people attending today whose connections are vital to our family's interests. And your family's interests take precedence over your son's wishes on his wedding day? I asked, keeping my voice measured but firm. Victoria glanced nervously at the arriving guests, clearly concerned about making a scene. Her fingers nervously adjusted her pearl necklace. Real, of course, and probably inherited through generations. "This is hardly the time or place for this discussion," she hissed. "I agree completely," I said, "which is why I suggest we all take our places and allow James and Elise to have the wedding they want, not the one that serves your agenda." Before either of them could respond, the string quartet began playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Diana stepped forward with remarkable composure, her event planning training kicking in despite the tension. "Mrs. Cavendish, if you'll take your seat in the front row on the right. Mr. Cavendish, please proceed to the bridal suite to escort Elise. Ms. Chen, your seat is in the front row on the left." Victoria looked like she might protest further, but Richard placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Not now, Victoria. We'll deal with this later." As they moved away, Diana gave me a look that mingled respect with trepidation. That was unexpected. "Sometimes unexpected is exactly what's needed," I replied. I took my seat in the front row, aware of curious glances from other guests who had likely been told I was just the caterer. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as the groomsmen took their places at the front, followed by the bridesmaids in flowing pale blue gowns the exact shade of the harbor on a clear summer day. Then James appeared, walking alone to take his place at the altar. My breath caught at the sight of him, so handsome in his tailored tuxedo, so much the man I'd raised, yet somehow new today. His face was solemn but resolute, shoulders straight with a quiet confidence. As he passed my seat, he reached out and squeezed my hand, a small gesture that spoke volumes about the shift in our relationship. The music changed to the traditional wedding march, and everyone stood as Elise appeared on her father's arm. She was radiant, her gown catching the sunlight in a way that seemed to illuminate her from within, her expression a mixture of nervousness and joy. Richard's face was a careful mask as he escorted her down the aisle, but I could see the tension in his stance, the artificial stiffness of his movements. The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful, conducted by an older female judge who was apparently a mentor to Elise in law school. James and Elise had written their own vows, speaking of partnership, growth, and building a life based on shared values rather than external expectations. I noticed Victoria dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, her composure finally cracking at her daughter's sincere words. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the guests erupted in applause. James and Elise practically floated back down the aisle, their faces alight with genuine happiness that no amount of family tension could diminish. As the recessional music played, I found myself thinking that perhaps this day would turn out all right after all. My optimism was short-lived. As guests began moving toward the cocktail area, Diana approached me with an apologetic expression, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Ms. Chen, the photographer is ready for family portraits. Mrs. Cavendish has requested that the original photo plan be followed." I sighed. Some battles weren't worth fighting, especially not when they would cast a shadow over James and Elise's. "It's all right. I understand." "No, it's not all right," said a voice behind me. James stood there, Elise at his side, both of them looking determined. "Mom, you're going to be in these photos. End of discussion." "James, I don't want to create more tension." "You're not creating it," Elise interrupted firmly. "My parents are, and it stops now." She turned to Diana. "Please inform the photographer that Ms. Chen will be included in all family portraits and that my husband and I won't be proceeding until that's understood." Diana nodded, looking both impressed and alarmed. Of course. The resulting photo session was a study in barely concealed tensions. Victoria and Richard maintained frozen smiles while the photographer arranged and rearranged groupings. I stood beside James, painfully aware of the gulf between the two sides of the newly joined family, a gulf made wider by the Cavendish's obvious discomfort at my presence. I always did love a good family drama, murmured a distinguished older woman as the photographer repositioned us yet again. She was standing next to me, her silver hair elegantly styled, her eyes sharp with intelligence. Though usually I prefer to watch rather than participate. "And you are?" I asked quietly, while maintaining my smile for the camera. "Eleanor Westfield, Richard's aunt, the black sheep of the family," she smiled mischievously. "Which makes us natural allies, I think." I couldn't help but smile back, a genuine one this time. "Olivia Chen. I know exactly who you are," she said. "The woman who built an empire from nothing while raising a remarkable young man. Far more impressive than inheriting wealth and losing it slowly over generations." I looked at her in surprise. "You seem well informed." "I make it my business to know things," she replied, her voice low but clear. "Especially about family. The Cavendishes have been living on appearances for years. The shipping company is a shell of what it once was. The real estate holdings are mortgaged to the hilt. Only the club membership remains solid, and that's only because the Bayview Harbor Club never allows members to sell their memberships. Once you're in for life, passing it down through generations." "I had no idea," I admitted, though I'd suspected something similar based on their attempt to negotiate my catering fee. "Few do. That's the point." Eleanor's eyes twinkled, with mischief. "Though I hear rumors that the club's ownership might be changing hands soon, bought by some mysterious restaurant entrepreneur. Wouldn't that be something?" Before I could respond, the photographer called for another arrangement, and Eleanor moved away with a knowing smile that left me wondering exactly how much she knew. The cocktail hour that followed was a testament to my team's professionalism. Despite all the drama behind the scenes, the service was flawless, the food exquisite. Duck and scallop crostini with cherry reduction, lobster spring rolls with ginger lime dipping sauce, and champagne poached oysters disappeared from serving trays almost as soon as they appeared. I moved among the guests, not as the caterer, but as the mother of the groom, accepting congratulations and compliments on the exceptional cuisine. "You must share the name of your caterer," gushed a woman in Chanel tweeds, clearly one of Victoria's friends, unaware of who I was. "These appetizers are divine." "I would be happy to," I replied, unable to resist a small moment of satisfaction. "It's Pearl Garden. I own it." Her surprise was almost comical, her eyebrows disappearing beneath her expertly styled bangs. "You're the chef? But you're James's mother?" "Yes." I smiled pleasantly. "Food is our family business." Word spread quickly after that. I could see guests reassessing me, their curiosity piqued by this unexpected development. The woman they'd dismissed as an embarrassing immigrant mother was actually the renowned chef creating their extraordinary meal. The whispers changed from "she's the mother" to "she's the chef," with a subtle but important shift in tone from dismissive to impressed. As we moved into dinner, I briefly excused myself to check on the kitchen. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Under Marcus's supervision, the duck skins crisping to perfection, the sea bass fillets poaching in aromatic broth, the delicate sauces holding their consistency. "You should be enjoying yourself," he admonished when he saw me. "This is your son's wedding, not just another job." "I am," I assured him. "I just wanted to make sure the entrees are ready to go." "Perfect timing and temperature," he confirmed. "Go back to your son. We've got this. Chef's orders." I returned to find that I'd been seated at the family table after all, directly across from Victoria and Richard. James had clearly rearranged the seating chart. Victoria's lips were pressed into a thin line, but she maintained her composure, too well-bred to make a scene. The meal unfolded beautifully, each course more spectacular than the last. The tea-smoked duck with 5-spice reduction drew audible sighs of pleasure. The miso-glazed sea bass with pickled vegetable slaw had even the most discriminating palates impressed. When the black sesame cake was wheeled out, 5 tiers of modern elegance that honored both tradition and innovation, Audible gasps of appreciation rippled through the room. James stood to make a toast, his glass raised, his expression earnest. Before we cut this magnificent cake, I want to thank the person who made not just this beautiful creation, but who made me the man I am today. He looked directly at me, his eyes shining with emotion. My mother, Olivia Chen, came to this country with nothing but determination and talent. She built a remarkable business while raising me alone. Everything I have accomplished, everything I owe to her strength, her sacrifice, and her unwavering love. The room erupted in applause. I felt tears welling in my eyes as James continued. Many of you know her restaurants Pearl Garden, which have redefined Asian fusion cuisine in New England. What you might not know is that every dish you've enjoyed today was personally designed by my mother. This wedding feast is her gift to us, a gift of love, artistry, and forgiveness that I can never fully repay. Victoria and Richard sat stone-faced amid the enthusiastic response from the guests. Their carefully constructed narrative was crumbling, in real time, replaced by something far more compelling. A story of immigrant success, maternal devotion, and culinary genius that resonated with everyone in the room. After the cake cutting and first dance, I slipped away to make a quick phone call, confirming that everything was in place for tomorrow's revelation. When I returned, Eleanor Westfield cornered me near the bar, a martini in one hand and a knowing expression on her face. "That was quite a toast," she said approvingly. "The tide is turning, isn't it?" "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "though I suspect the Cavendishes will recover their composure once the wedding is over." "Maybe not as quickly as you think." Eleanor sipped her martini with obvious enjoyment. "I understand the club's new owner is making some significant changes. Membership review, new policies, quite revolutionary for an institution as entrenched as Bayview." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart rate quickened. Change can be healthy for institutions. "Indeed." She raised her glass slightly. "To new beginnings, and to the look on my nephew's face tomorrow when reality finally catches up with him." The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of dancing, toasts, and tradition. James and Elise were radiant, their joy seemingly untouched by the undercurrents of family tension. I danced with James, my heart full as he led me around the floor with the grace of the little boy who had once stood on my feet while we practiced in our tiny apartment kitchen. "I'm so proud of you," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. "Not just for your accomplishments, but for the man you've become. For finding your way back to what matters." "I'm sorry it took me so long," he said quietly. "I got lost for a while there. What matters is that you found your way home." As the evening wound down, James and Elise prepared to depart for their honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Japan that I had privately upgraded to first class as a wedding gift. James embraced me tightly before leaving. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. For showing up today, for not giving up on me even when I deserved it." "Be happy," I told him, cupping his face in my hands the way I had when he was a little boy. "That's all I've ever wanted for you." "I know that now," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry it took me so long to remember it." After they departed in a shower of rose petals, I found myself face to face with Victoria and Richard in the nearly empty ballroom. The staff was already beginning the cleanup, transforming the space back to its usual state of dignified elegance. "Well," Victoria said, stiffly, "I suppose we should thank you for the meal. It was exceptional." "Thank you," I replied simply, not giving them the satisfaction of my gratitude for their belated recognition. Richard cleared his throat, adjusting his bow tie. "James mentioned that you'll be attending the brunch tomorrow at the club." "Yes. I'm looking forward to it." I kept my tone pleasant but non-committal. "We would appreciate it if you would maintain discretion about certain family matters," he said carefully, his eyes darting around to ensure no one was within earshot. I regarded them both steadily. The only family matters I'm concerned with involve my son and his happiness. The rest is your business. Our family has a certain position to maintain, Victoria persisted, her fingers once again fidgeting with her pearls. Appearances are important in our world. So I've gathered, I said. But perhaps your world is changing more quickly than you realize. Before they could respond, I excused myself to oversee the final breakdown of the catering equipment. Let them wonder what I meant. Tomorrow would reveal everything soon enough. I slept surprisingly well that night. A deep, dreamless sleep that came from emotional exhaustion and the relief of having my son back in my life fully, not partially, not conditionally. The morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect May day that makes New England bearable after its harsh winters. I dressed with particular care in a silk pantsuit, the color of jade, my grandmother's pendant once again around my neck. I arrived at Bayview Harbor Club early, not as a caterer, this time but as an honored guest for the post-wedding brunch. The club's manager, Mr. Phillips, a man who had likely seen generations of Cavendishes come and go, greeted me at the entrance with deferential respect. Ms. Chen, welcome. Everything is prepared according to your specifications. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I appreciate your discretion in this matter. Of course, madam. The staff has been fully briefed. Victoria and Richard arrived shortly after, clearly surprised to see me already comfortably ensconced in the club's main dining room, chatting with the manager as if I belonged there. Victoria's expression was particularly priceless. Confusion, giving way to displeasure, then carefully masked with social politeness. Ms. Chen, Richard said cautiously. I wasn't aware you were a member here. Oh, I'm not, I replied with a small smile. At least, not in the traditional sense. Mr. Phillips stepped forward, the absolute picture of a proper club manager, though I detected a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Cavendish, I'd like to formally introduce you to Ms. Olivia Chen, the new owner of Bayview Harbor Club. The blood drained from Victoria's face so quickly I momentarily worried she might faint. Richard's mouth actually fell open, his carefully cultivated composure shattering completely. That's impossible, he sputtered. The club isn't for sale. It never has been. Not to the general public, I agreed. But the board found my offer quite compelling when presented by my investment group 3 months ago. The transfer of ownership was finalized last week. 3 months, Victoria repeated faintly. Before the wedding invitations. Before you decided I wasn't worthy to appear in your son's wedding photos. I finished for her. Life is full of interesting timing, isn't it? Richard's face had moved from shock to anger. This is some kind of trick. Some kind of revenge. Not at all, I replied calmly. It was a business decision. Bayview Harbor Club represents an excellent diversification opportunity for my restaurant group. We'll be expanding the dining facilities, of course, and introducing a more innovative menu. But the membership, Victoria began, clearly thinking of her carefully cultivated social circle. Will be reviewed, I confirmed. We're implementing a meritocracy approach, achievements rather than ancestry, contribution rather than connection. As other guests began to arrive for the brunch, I excused myself, leaving Victoria and Richard to absorb the implications of their new reality. The mother they had deemed too embarrassing to be seen in wedding photos now owned the very sanctuary of exclusivity they had used to assert their social superiority. James and Elise joined the brunch shortly after, looking rested and happy after their first night as a married couple. James's eyes widened when he saw the deference with which the staff treated me, and widened further when an ashen-faced Richard pulled him aside to presumably explain the situation. When James approached me later, his expression was one of amazement. "Did you know?" he asked me quietly as we filled our plates at the buffet. "About the club? When they cut you from the photos?" "About the club? Yes," I admitted. "It was a business decision I made months ago. The timing was Fortunate. He shook his head in amazement. They'll never recover from this. They will, I said with more generosity than I had expected to. Feel. People like the Cavendishes always do. But perhaps with a bit more humility and a greater appreciation for those they once dismissed. Later, as the brunch wound down, Eleanor Westfield approached me again, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Masterfully played," she said. "Not many could have orchestrated such a perfect response without being vindictive or cruel. You've taught them a lesson while giving them a path to save face. That takes wisdom." "I didn't do it to teach them a lesson," I said truthfully. "But I won't pretend I'm not satisfied with how things turned out. You know," Eleanor mused, "they'll try to paint you as the villain in this story when they tell it later. The immigrant who schemed her way into ownership of their beloved club." "Let them," I replied serenely. "I know who I am and what I've built. I don't need their approval anymore. Neither does James." 2 months after the wedding, I sat across from James and Elise in my office at Pearl Garden's flagship location. They had returned from their honeymoon with a newfound clarity about their future. "We've decided not to take the Cavendish house," Elise announced. "We're looking for something smaller, something we can afford on our own. I don't want to be beholden to my parents. And I'm exploring opening my own investment firm," James added. "Something ethically focused, helping immigrant entrepreneurs secure funding. I want to help people like you, Mom. People with dreams and determination who just need someone to believe in them." I couldn't have been prouder. "That sounds wonderful." "My parents are still reeling from the club situation," Elise admitted with a small smile. "Dad's trying to spin it as a positive development, networking with you for business opportunities. Mom's considering joining the Westchester Club instead, though Aunt Eleanor tells me they're not accepting new members currently." "How unfortunate." "For her," I said, not entirely successful at hiding my amusement. James reached across the desk and took my hand. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said about knowing where you belong. I want you to know that I'm no longer confused about that. I belong with Elise, building something real together, and I belong with you, honored to be your son, never forgetting what you sacrificed to give me every opportunity." I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to find your own path without forgetting where you came from." As they left, I walked to the window overlooking the harbor. In the distance, I could see Bayview Harbor Club, its flag snapping in the breeze. I had already initiated changes there, expanding membership to include accomplished individuals regardless of family background, starting a culinary apprenticeship program for underprivileged youth, hosting cultural events that celebrated diversity rather than exclusivity. The Cavendishes had tried to erase me from their perfect family portrait, never imagining that I would end up owning the very symbol of the exclusivity they had used against me. But my victory wasn't in ownership or in watching them squirm. My true triumph was in standing proudly as myself, immigrant, mother, entrepreneur, and finally having my son recognize the value in our shared journey. The country club was just property, but the lesson it taught was priceless. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.